Okay, AP Theory, we are going to talk about closed structure and open structure in voicing. So, your assignment for today is going to be self-test 5-2. It's copied. The guest teacher will pass that out to you. In section number 1, you need to analyze this excerpt. You need to use Roman numerals and base position symbols. Then, show beneath each Roman numeral the structure of the chord by writing O for open or C for closed structure. I want to talk a little bit about closed structure. So, first of all, in closed structure, you have to have less than an octave between the soprano and tenor line. There's an excellent example of this in your book on page 71. The example is 5-8. It's old 100th. Closed is up here where you've got less than an octave between this, and then open is when you have more than an octave. So these notes are all closed. We've got a leap of a sixth, or a distance of a sixth, throughout these few. This one is G up to E, so that's also a sixth. It stays a sixth until we get to this section where it says open. We have an octave and then an octave plus throughout the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. So we have B up to B at the end of the open section, and then it closes back down again. D up to B is a sixth, and those distances maintain less than an octave through the rest of the time. So in your assignment, at the top of self-test 5-2, you need to label the type of the chord. Remember, the answers are in the back of your book on page 56, so you're labeling the type of the chord. You have a G, a B flat, a D, and a G, and you are in the key of G, so this is going to be, G minor, so this is going to be a 1 triad, and then you check the interval between the tenor and the soprano. In this case, it is B flat up to G, which is less than an octave, so it's closed. We continue along. We have the same notes. We've moved the bass up the octave, so it's still a 1 triad in minor in the key of G. It is still closed because the B flat and the G are the same distance apart. For the third triad, we have F sharp, A, D, and A. So we are looking at a 5 chord in first inversion, and you now have an octave between the A and the A, so this is open. And that's how you will continue on the way. Now, the next chunk of the assignment is about parallel motion. It's comparing the parts here, and you are looking for crossed voices and spacing. Okay, so what you need to do is review the 2 conventions concerning spacing on page 71 and 72, then point out in the following examples any places where those conventions are not followed. So we're going to go to the book, page 71. We are looking at crossed voices. It says, do not allow any part to cross above the soprano or below the bass because the essential soprano bass counterpoint might become unclear. In example 5-9, we have a highlighted area here that says no. The alto part has moved above the soprano part. We do not want this. We also have an example, exercise B. We do not want the tenor line with the stem up moving below the bass line. Okay, so you want to be very, very careful that that happens. There are situations where we have parts crossing in the alto and tenor line. There are specific reasons for this. We will get into that. There's an example at the bottom of the page here on page 71. Now we're going to flip the page and we're going to take a look at spacing on the top of page 72. Spacing. When writing for 3 or more parts, avoid overly spacious sonorities by keeping adjacent upper parts, excluding the bass, within an octave of each other. For example, in a 4-part texture, there should be no more than an octave between soprano and alto. So we're going to take a look at example 5-1. We do not want this. We do not want the alto more than an octave away from the tenor. Example 5-11b, we do not want the tenor and the alto more than an octave apart. And in this case, the tenor is on a D, the alto is on an F sharp. It is okay, however, to have the bass and tenor more than an octave apart. But in this chord, you have bass, tenor, alto, soprano. The soprano and alto are a fourth apart. The alto and tenor are a third apart. And the bass and the tenor are a tenth apart. So these are all things that are okay. We need to make sure that those things are happening as we look at our homework. So let's take a look at section B, which is parallel motion. You are looking for crossed voices. We'll label that as 1. We're looking for spacing. We'll label that as 2, where it's a problem. So the first place where we find crossed voices is right here. We're going to label that as 1. We want to make sure that we do not have those crossed voices. An example of spacing, the first place that I see it is here between the alto and the tenor. We have an octave right there, okay? And then that continues to spread moving on. So please make sure you know what's going on there. Finally, letter C. Following those rules, we want to make sure that we can label the notes here in a way that works. Now, there are a couple of these in C, self-test 2, where there can be more than one answer. But please choose your best answer. The direction reads, fill in the circled missing inner voices, voice or voices, to complete each root position triad, being sure that each note of the triad is represented. Follow the spacing conventions and stay within the range of each vocal part. The ranges are on page 72. You need to look at those very carefully. But in general, what we are looking at here is we're looking at locating the alto line on number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in this case, we are in the key of G. The bass is on scale degree 1. The soprano is on scale degree 3. So we are going to create the alto note on scale degree 5. That will complete the triad, and the voicing needs to be correct. So in a G chord, we have G, B, and D. So we are looking for an alto note that is within the alto range, that is on a D, and is within an octave of the soprano line. So we are going to put our D right here. Okay, moving down to number 5, we have to fill in the alto and tenor line. In this case, we are in the key of F major. F major, we are looking for a 6 chord, so it's D, F, and A. We have a D in the bass, we have a D in the soprano, so we need an F of some sort in the tenor or alto line and an A of some sort in the tenor or alto line. There are a couple of options here. I would recommend that we have an A in the alto line here. That's a fourth from the soprano and would be just fine. And I would recommend that we go up near the top of the tenor range and put an F here. Put an F there. So we have a fourth between the soprano and alto. We have a third between the alto and tenor. We have a tenth between the bass and the tenor, which is fine. You don't have the same limits. So please complete 2, 3, 4 with just the alto line written in. Please complete 6, 7, 8 with both the alto and tenor line in, following the rules. Please remember the answers begin on page 566. This will be due tomorrow at the beginning of class.